When it comes to their IT systems, municipalities often have 30 or more different silos to protect. What happens when someone opens an email packed with trouble? I'm Tanya Hall for ZDNet and Tech Republic, and joining me is Lester Godsey. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for Mesa, Arizona. Welcome, Lester.
Thank you.
So what does a CISO for a large city do?
Well, you could say other duties is assigned, but my primary focus is on all things cybersecurity for the 36th largest city in the country, basically. So that ranges from security operations to threat intelligence, cyber hunting, to governance and general readiness and helping the organization make good decisions as it relates to measuring risk and addressing those risks from a cybersecurity perspective.
Back in March of 2018, the city of Atlanta was targeted by a ransomware attack that affected a number of its systems. Tell us about the unique challenges that municipalities face in cyber defense and specifically ransomware.
So one of the distinguishing factors with municipalities as opposed to other sectors is the fact that we operate in a lot of instances like multinational conglomerates, except we don't typically have the resources that your Fortune 500s would have. So if you think about the nature of services that cities provide, it ranges from your park and recreation programs to entertainment, to utilities, to transportation, to development services. So if you're buying a house and you're doing an improvement to your home with a permit, and everything in between, not to mention public safety, frankly. You can consider that most cities have somewhere between 20 and 30 different verticals that they're responsible for. And what makes that challenging is that you then have 20, 30 different enterprise systems, because it's typically not just one, and you have to take those into consideration. Your audience also tends to be pretty diverse as well. So you obviously have your residents, but then you have your visitors to your communities, as well as those businesses that operate within your community. So when you take that all into consideration, just the sheer footprint and the sheer expanse of what you have to protect from a proactive perspective, as well as addressing attacks as they occur, is quite enormous. And again, governments have those challenges, and they typically don't have the same resources as your Fortune 500s.
How have ransomware attacks changed in the last few years? I mean, it feels like they occur in multiple layers.
Yeah, that's absolutely the case. One of the things that we've seen and we've noticed is these ransomware attacks. In some instances, the vectors will change a little bit, although I would say from our experience that a good 70–80% of all attacks or attempts come through email. So that hasn't changed so much. But what we've seen is ransom attacks aren't necessarily the only attack. So it's not a single prong, for example. So it might appear that an organization's being attacked via ransomware. There's files that are being encrypted. That's not to suggest that these threat actors or bad guys aren't dropping other payloads within your environment or attempting to do that. So one of the things that we've seen, whether it's just ransomware attacks in general, is they're becoming more and more multi-pronged. So
what technologies do cities use to prevent or mitigate the ransomware attacks? Are the legacy systems prevalent in many of the cities that are outmatched?
Well, and so that's part of the challenge. It's a combination of resources, and in some instances, certain compliance standards are a little bit behind the times. So in a lot of cases, municipalities, if they are budget constrained, then they're using legacy antivirus software, which frankly is wholly inadequate these days, especially when it comes to ransomware and other types of attacks. Because those AV solutions tend to be definition or file-based, meaning they have to have seen it in the past, they have to have notated it, and look for very specific things that they match identically with. Now, these threat actors are frankly pretty sharp, and so what they wind up doing is obfuscating what the signature looks like. So traditional AV for a couple of years now has been rendered pretty ineffectual when it comes to advanced ransomware or other types of attacks. But then the other thing too is, in a lot of instances with compliance, the language might be set up in such a way where you have to have antivirus, where the advanced endpoint solutions that address the concerns I just mentioned aren't technically considered antivirus. So in a lot of cases, what vendors have done is lump in the free version of Microsoft Windows Defender in conjunction with their solution to meet the letter of the law, as well as provide a solution that frankly works.
How has the increasing use of IoT devices made your job even more challenging?
So you hit the nail on the head in terms of my top two concerns or things that keep me up at night. One of them is IoT. So, and this is something that transcends all sectors, in my opinion, in talking to my counterparts within public agencies as well as private sector. And the fact that IoT devices are so ubiquitous and they're so fluid is what makes it the biggest challenge. And so what I mean by that is in your traditional approach, say 5-10 years ago, everybody was fixated on protecting the perimeter. So as long as you had a good firewall, IDS, IPS, things of that sort, that generally was sufficient. And that's no longer the case. And in large part is because of IoT devices. So if you look at where you work and you ask yourselves how many new TVs have been put in place, how many web cameras have been put into place, or even refrigerators these days, all these devices are network connected. They're all points of ingress and egress in and out of your environment. And so the concept of the perimeter no longer exists. So that's what's made it really challenging. And then the other thing though too is, from a cybersecurity perspective, I try to take the stance that my job isn't to say no to the organization. In my case, my CIO and the city manager. My job is to help the organization accomplish its mission and vision in the most secure manner possible. So IoT is critical with regards to initiatives. In our case, like smart cities is something that we're very focused on. IoT is going to be a huge source of data. So in my position, whether I like IoT or not, the simple fact is that we're going to see a proliferation even more so than we are today. So how do we go about allowing those IoT devices to operate the way they're intended, but at the same time ensure that the data that they're collecting and the device themselves are secured? So
what options are available to enterprises who fall victim to a ransomware attack? I mean, is it best just to pay up?
So truthfully, if you're successfully hit by a ransomware attack, you only have one of two choices: either pay the ransom or you restore from backups. So really, at least our general rule of thumb, every organization is different. So I hesitate to say there's a blanket right answer or wrong answer. You have to address that yourselves. What I would say is if you're inclined to pay the ransom, there's no guarantee that you're going to get the decryption key to decrypt the data in the first place. And then also B, there's a strong likelihood that your organization's then going to kind of be blacklisted with regards to this organization's paid a ransom in the past. So there's a greater likelihood if we hit them again that they'll pay again. And so those are things that you have to take into consideration. But as we've heard stories about certain organizations in the health industry, things of that sort, the business needs outweighed that. And so you have to take it on a case-by-case basis. One other thing too along those lines is if your organization wants to have that option available to them, it's not like you can get some sort of digital currency account in a matter of minutes. So that takes some planning as well too.
So then what steps should an enterprise take to prevent or harden themselves against ransomware attacks?
So what I would recommend that a lot of CISOs in my role also recommend is a layered approach with respect to that. So think about how data flows in and out of your environment, and then upon that analysis, determine what the appropriate controls are for each of those layers, if you will. So like I had mentioned earlier, a good percentage of our attempts come in through email. So we've employed a third-party anti-spam, anti-phishing solution to try to mitigate a lot of that risk before it even makes it to our users' inboxes. From there, you can employ additional rules or controls in place to look for known bads. And then blacklist that. So we do that through our next generation firewall. Additionally, and like we talked about earlier, we employ an advanced endpoint solution. In our case, it's Sentinel-1. And that gives us the ability, it gives us that advanced AV component, as well as it gives us insight on what is in our network as well, too. So it's a discovery part as well as the remediation. And then one step that a lot of organizations probably don't spend as much time on as they should is, if anybody says that they can guarantee you with 100% that your organization is going to be secure, you should probably look at somebody else, right? Because that's just never the case. There's no such thing as 100%. So oftentimes organizations don't spend as much time in the remediation process. So in the case of ransomware, doing tabletop exercises, going through regular exercises on how you can contain and reduce how far spread a ransomware attack gets is critical. And then lastly, which is obvious, but in some cases just requires additional discipline, is you have to make sure you have good backups. And so like I had mentioned earlier, when you're successfully hit with ransomware, you have two choices. And so preferably you have backups that you can restore from, and then you can continue on. So
great advice, Lester Godsey. He is the CISO for Mesa, Arizona. Thank you so much for joining us and sharing some insight in protected cities. If somebody wants to connect with you, maybe they want to find out more information on how to protect their city, how can they do that?
Sure. So two options that you have. You can reach me through our public-facing website for the city of Mesa. It's www.mesaaz.gov, or you can find me on LinkedIn by my name, Lester Godsey.
Sounds great. Thanks so much again. And if you guys want to connect with me, you can. You can find my interviews right here on ZDNet or Tech Republic, or maybe go to my website, tanyahall.net. I've got links to all my social sites. Thanks for watching.